We'll waffle on.
We will waffle on. Let's see. Hopefully this works. Okay. I think it's live.
I can get the phone up on stream up on my phone. Hang on.
And we are live. So, oh no, the name of it isn't great. But hello and welcome to the FRL season 13 teammates, not tiers, for hopefully the best ever season in FRL history. And I am here with not co-commentator, more I guess co-explainer, if that's the thing, with James Head, RC F1 commentator. How are you doing, James?
I'm doing really well, fresh off my second jab of coronavirus, but I'm absolutely fine on this beautiful Monday evening.
Good to hear. And we'll be running you through the 4 tiers of all the teammates, the 10 or 80 teammate pairings. Oh, sorry, that's shocking, Mass. It's 40 teammate pairings, or 80 drivers, that is. But just waiting for everyone to tune in. I think we've got 7 viewers, so I think we can start away. Starting with F4, hopefully, I think on the stream it looks all good to me. Kinda not, but let me see if I can make this work. Okay. I've got the issue. Give me a second. Now we can see F4 and F3, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, all good, okay. Well, starting with F4, James, obviously you commentated over it with me for, I think it was Bahrain, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, sorry, for the social race for F3 and F4 for Belgium. And Bahrain was Jensen and Mads, and obviously Spain was myself and Dan. So I think a lot of people know kind of about the quality of F4 and the drives in it. But do you think you'll be expecting a fairly close championship, or do you think it could be quite a spread out field?
Yeah, you can imagine so, to be honest. We've got drivers like Evil, Zukin or Steven, who are probably the quicker of the guys out of the F4 championship. And then you've got drivers like Humanoid and Paul's Got Balls. Lewis, that is not a swear word, by the way. That is his name on the stream. And we've got the Dutch pairings as well. Bink, Seth, Tice Power and Evil. It makes for an interesting session, I think, and it makes certainly for an interesting championship moving forward for F4.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few drivers who haven't made many races, if any. For some of them, I know Team 7 of Arise and Crypto, we haven't seen anything of them, so they could be probably maybe even verging on F3 pace, but we don't know until obviously Bahrain, which is a week away exactly, obviously at 7 o'clock. But do you think possibly contenders maybe could be Team 2, James, with those Steven and Demoniac, who got a 1-2 finish for Spain pre-season?
Yeah, you'd like to imagine so, to be honest. Both of them are teamed up in the same team as well, I would imagine. So obviously they're going to be quite competitive, but they've got to get the stigma out, I think, of being first and second driver. There shouldn't be a first and second driver. You should be competing for the same team with your teammate, and that's what will make a good successful pairing in terms of the constructors. And also looking at others as well, like Ed and Senna, for example, Illicit Brownie. Some of these guys I've necessarily not commentated on, but they are quick guys, and it makes, I think, overall for a really good season.
It's funny, Ayrton Senna, I think, got mistaken by a few guys for David Wallbank after having really good pace and then crashing. I think it was lap 1 at turn 7 of Spain, so that's not the best of comparisons, is it?
Definitely not. We don't want to hear that name ever said on the FRL stream ever again, I think.
Yeah, definitely not. But I do think there's a few guys you would probably look out for. I think VIP, GJ, Gamer and Day Night, they looked really strong in pre-season. I think they might be lacking the consistency of Team 2, who obviously were lapping really closely. There was never really any spins or mistakes from Demoniac or O'Steven in pre-season, apart from obviously O'Steven getting involved in an incident with Ayrton Senna in Bahrain. So I feel like, do you think, James, maybe consistency will come out on top, or do you think it will be down to raw pace in F4?
I think consistency is going to be key across all tiers, to be honest, within FRL. And I think, honestly, in F4 especially, where you've got drivers around the same pace, around the same level, it'll make for an interesting season, but they've got to keep up that consistency if they want to be successful. And, of course, if they want to try and make a stake for moving up to F3, even F2 going forward.
And I think, summarising this F4 analysis, Do you have any favourites or anyone you would predict to be kind of in that top echelon of F4?
You'd like to imagine, I think, based off what we've seen, obviously, in the social races and obviously in the first two races in pre-season, I think Demonac could be the one to beat the Belgian, alongside old Steven, obviously. Them two look nailed on, I think, in terms of the constructors. Obviously, I can't say much because I haven't really commentated on these guys, so I can't get a grasp of their pace. But it still makes for a really interesting season. I think, as I say, consistency is going to be key throughout FRL F4. And think of it as the Academy League. You guys are in the Academy League, and think of this as your opportunity to shine in a lower tier to try and get yourself up into the topper tiers.
Yeah, I think drivers like Humanoid and Paul's Got Balls, they've definitely got a lot to show, because a lot of these drivers are coming from F2 last season, where they didn't really get the spotlight to obviously compete near the front with a very, very kind of spread out grid in F2. So hopefully they take the bull by the horns and really do fight for the top places and give us a good run for everyone's money.
Yeah, that'll be, I think, fantastic from our perspective. And of course, you can catch all the FRL, F4 and F3 action, and we'll go to F3 shortly, on this channel, 7 p.m. UK time, starting next week, of course, in Bahrain.
Yeah, streams at the same time, and I think that's a nice little transformation, I think, to F3, which hopefully, I think if I get it up right, that looks slowly but surely at Grandpa pace. I think that's it. So there are F3, the 10 teams that will be battling it out, I'm sure, very closely for the constructors, of course. I think F3 is definitely a fan favourite in FRL, just by the sheer how close. I don't think you can even call it midfield. They're all really at the front. You look at Team 6, who obviously were in Renault last season, who I believe finished second, obviously to McLaren. I won't boast too much. And I think Cassidy and Michael F1 in Team 5, they were Racing Point, who finished third. They were also fairly close behind. But there's so many teams, aren't there, that could be fighting right at the top.
Yeah, there is so many teams that can be fighting at the top. You've got the likes of Jacko and Bullboy, who we know are very consistent. We know Jacko's been picking up the pace in the last couple of weeks as well. JB and Scar seems like an interesting pairing. I think we've got Charlie and Oliver. All of these guys, again, are around the same pace. And you'd like to imagine actually looking through the tiers, and we'll get to F2 and F1 as we go forward. But F3, I think, is probably going to be one of the closest tiers, just purely on the pace angle, and purely because that these guys know each other. They know their racing standards, and it should make for a fascinating tier, I think.
I think this is a bold call, but I would say maybe F3 is the most experienced field out of all the tiers, because you have got the likes of Bullboy, who obviously started the league. You got Jacko, you got the old names of Michael Van Dongen, who actually won F3, let's not forget. I think it was season 7 or 6, I believe, in the Toro Rosso. So he's got the experience and consistency for sure to go the whole way. I know drivers like Edzak as well, he's been showing really good form, I think, from last season. He could definitely put up a strong fight. I think he might have finished third place in the standings of F2. So drivers-wise, he might also be up there. Bulow, he impressed in pre-season as well. But there's still a few unknowns, aren't there, with Casey, Nick, I'd probably say TVA Football, and I think those three are the main ones we don't really know about, do we?
No, not really. I think obviously with them being new drivers, they haven't really fitted into the mould of FRL in the past. But looking at the field, you'd like to imagine that it's going to be the most competitive tier, I think, out of all four. And I say that being an FRL F1 commentator. So I think F3 might just have the one over on us. Just going back to Van Dongen as well, he won F3, I think the last time I was actually in FRL, he actually won the tier in F3. He's got Rackler alongside him, and Rackler was really pacey in Spain in the second pre-season race, won that race, and Rackler's probably going to try and stake himself, I think. If he can clean up his driving standards, he'll be a real competitor, I think, for possibly the Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, I mean, I had a word with Rackler, I think, about a month ago when we were unsure about how many tiers there was going to be, and he was going to be F2, and I think when we had 3 tiers, and he said he relished the challenge of a very competitive grid, even if he is towards the midfield. So I think Rackler is one of those drivers who loves to get their kind of claws into these sorts of championships and really fight through all the hard times, especially, I guess, if he has some DNFs along the way. So in terms of constructors, James, do you think there's anyone who really stands out to you? I mean, looking at Team 1, they could also be... I think they've really improved over the course of last season, but anyone you've got your eye on?
I've got to be honest, Team 4, Jacko and Ballboy, two really, really consistent drivers. Jacko obviously has been known for having a bit of poor performances in the past in FRL, but hopefully he can put that to one side. And Ballboy, Mr. Consistent himself, he's alongside him. Hopefully they're going to be in the same... Well, they are going to be in the same team. Hopefully they get a really good car in terms of their choices. That, of course, I think goes live at 9 o'clock tonight. But Jacko and Ballboy, for me, probably are the team to beat. Van Dungen and Racklow, I think, are going to be up there. And to put a real throw into the mix, I think JB and Scarf, they are very consistent in terms of the team angle. They could be Constructors' champions as well.
Yeah, the Scotsman and the Englishman. I'm not sure about that. I think if those two can maybe keep out of the walls, as they did have quite a few DNFs last season, they could be right in the mix there. Obviously, they were competing as a midfield runner last season, and maybe that could even change to a kind of maybe towards the top 8 consistently. But we'll yet to see that. Obviously, they competed in F2 last season, and I think I'll try to transition as best as I can. So we'll move over to F2 now, as obviously the second tier of the 4. And I think if I can scroll down a bit more, I have got that nicely. Okay. And we move on to F2, where I would say it's probably one of the more... You can't really predict it in particular. I think there's probably second most new drivers in this tier. A lot of guys who haven't really been here a while to know their particular pace. A few guys returning as well, the likes of Amesto, Umbra, Pace as well, the F2 champion from season 6, I think it would be.
Yep.
Sealaz as well, making a welcomed return. Amenda, as he came from last season, so it's a really kind of unknown grid. You've got a lot of experienced drivers, but you've also got a lot of inexperienced drivers as well mixed in there.
Yeah, I think the experienced overdoes the inexperienced. I think we've got the likes of Amenda in, of course, former F3 champion back in the past in FRL. We've got Pelly, we've got Silas. We've got drivers that have been around for absolute seasons upon seasons in FRL, in F1, F2, F3, and indeed, of course, in F4. But I think, to be honest, looking at the bare bones of it, it's a very consistent tier. Just how consistent remains to be seen, but I've got to throw out there, I think Pelly could be nailed on for the championship, for the Drivers' Championship. He's alongside Silas, who again is a very, very consistent driver himself. Pelly, though, will get the backing of Silas. They're both very, very good rivals out on track in the past. Both going to be in the same team. Pelly, I think, he should have the pace to try and overcome these. And then, of course, you've got FRL Paris as well, who obviously was FRL F1 last season, transitioning back to F2, who could be a really good driver to look at as well.
Yeah, I think looking at the grid, apart from myself, I think I'm the only driver who was from F2 last season. I think the rest are all F1. I know Pelly, Ryan was here for Abu Dhabi. He was in the mix there in qualifying, but obviously dropped away in the race. So I think Dark Tuner as well in pre-season, he obviously raced in F1 as a one-off to kind of see his pace, and he was well in the mix there, but not just quite F1 pace, I think, with consistency. So if he can keep it have as good as a performance in a race than he did in qualifying for Spain, he could also be up there. I'd probably say constructors wise, I'm gonna go for, if I had to predict right now, Amesto and Pace. You've got two drives there. I think Amesto would have been, I think it was F3 champion back when he already stole the win. Someone would remember in China from Steven and won, I think, the first 4 races, if I'm correct, of the season, and moved up to F1, but didn't really stay around for that long. But there's a lot of drivers there who could put a really good showing up for the drivers, couldn't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think Parrott and Henny are probably one of the favourites, I think, for the constructors. We saw how consistent they actually were in FRL F1 last season. Parrott, I think, has got probably the pace angle more than Henny, but I think it was last season, it was towards the end of the season, I can't remember what race it was, but they both performed to top 5 pace within FRL F1. I think it was either Abu Dhabi or the race before that, which I think was Brazil, one of the two. And they were so consistent in terms of the pace. They should be one of the favourites, I think, for the constructors.
Yeah, I definitely remember Parra. I think he made up about 4 positions on the first lap, if not more.
Yeah.
And I also have a good eye on the 2 Spaniards in Team 1 of David and Amenda. They were probably, I'd agree, the most consistent from last season in F1. They stepped in both at McLaren, and we'll obviously know, I think it's around Thursday, possibly, when we announce the teams, which team they'll be in this season. But they both really bounced off each other well. They were very close, just like McLaren in real life, with their pace and in the race. I think Amanda really had the kind of jump on David in the race, but David performed well in qualifying. So I think both of those two, there could be another season of an inter-team rivalry, especially if David brings his A game into the race.
Yeah, speaking about McLaren as well, David obviously teamed up with McLaren last season. Amanda actually won his FRL F3 championship in a McLaren. So you would imagine on form that they might go for that team. So it'll be interesting to see, obviously, with the driver picks and in terms of the team picks as well, how that is all going to unfold. I've got to throw you out there alongside Matt as well. Team 2, I think that's a really good pairing, very experienced drivers. And I know, Bunty, you've joined TTML as well moving forward. I think you're in F2 or F3. I can't confirm that, though, for sure. But a really, really good, interesting pace angle as well from both you and Mads' perspective. Very consistent drivers. Again, F2, I think, is probably similar level to F3. It should make for a really, really good season.
Yeah, I don't want to leave I'm lonely out, otherwise he might get a bit lonely. I think he signed up just after, or fairly a bit after Abu Dhabi, and also after obviously pre-season. Oh, I think we actually might have seen him in Spain, if I'm not mistaken. He could be one to watch along with Ryan. Ryan performed well in Abu Dhabi, I believe in a Renault he qualified around P8, but then fell away in the race to about P11, if I'm not mistaken. And he was mixing up with Silas, so I think if you put Silas in the mix for possibly kind of reinforcing Pelly's charge for a Drivers' Championship, you could also make a statement for Ryan to be up there. So I think all round in F2, who knows, it could be a very, very undecided championship until the last few races.
Yeah, I'm not mistaken, actually. Ryan used to be part of either Excel or Relentless, if I'm not mistaken. Confirm for me for that if I'm wrong and if I've got the wrong driver there. But Ryan, very, very consistent. He again raced in FRL F1. I think it was in Brazil he raced. And he drove a really, really good first couple of laps, albeit on very worn tyres as well. So Ryan has got that consistency in terms of his tyre management. But it's just how these guys transition from qualifying into the race. It's so important across all tiers that drivers get a good qualifying session in and then they transition that to the race. Because we see so many times the mental pressure that's put on from all of the drivers. You perform in qualifying, but then you DNF in the race. And that really knocks your confidence back. So stay positive and think it's a long season ahead.
And just before we move on to F1, would you have any advice in terms of the first few races, how you'd approach them as a driver? Do you think you'd go more aggressive and straight away trying to throw it into quali for pole, or would you kind of take it a bit more easy and just realise it is the start of the season?
I think in terms of qualifying, you've got to be as consistent and as quick as possible for the first round. Obviously, we're in Bahrain, and obviously these drivers have driven around Bahrain first in the first pre-season race. So they've already got that knowledge of what the track is like. Obviously, we're a few weeks older into the game cycle as well. So I think drivers will take on the notes that obviously we've said across all commentaries. And we'll hope that they can take that on board to really produce a good race in Bahrain. And hopefully it makes out for a very interesting season in F2.
Definitely. And I think that's a nice way to move on to F1 as pretty simple. I think it should be, give me a second, and it is there. Well, I mean, I personally put this as FRL's best ever grid, and I know definitely a lot of the drivers in there would definitely put a statement for themselves to be FRL driver champions for season 13. I obviously know some of the old seasons of Montana, who used to dominate, and that was a very competitive grid back then. But I have to say, this grid could probably give it a good run for their money.
This is about as competitive as you'll see for an FRL F1 grid, and I'm so not jealous that I'm actually commentating on this tier moving forward within FRL. And you've got so many consistent drivers and so many guys that are top pace. We've got Jensen, obviously, defending champion. Macho's going to be alongside him, recent signing to TTG. I saw that one in there just before. We've got, obviously, Denzel, Baraka, Rocco, Nathan. We've got all sorts of drivers. We've got Kazizel, for example, who has raced so well in FRL F2. And he actually was an FRL F2 champion back in the day, famously beating none only than Housey in Bahrain.
Yeah, that's a bit past my time. I can't remember that for sure. But I think I'll take back my statement about F3 having the most experienced grid. Looking through the field here, I know National Cheeto hasn't... Oh, we did compete in F2 in Spain, and he looked... I think he was really up there the whole time in terms of his pace. Did, I think, a 14.7 in qualifying, solidifying his place in F1. But constructors-wise, I would say out of anyone, I'd have my eyes on a... I don't know why he's called IFR Denso. I think there might be a typo there. I was going to say the LR boys, but it is meant to be LR Denso and LR Baraka, if I can say his name right, rather than Baccara. I think those two kind of Spanish-speaking drivers will be definitely right up there. Denso had a bit of a lack of consistency, I'd say, in FRL last season. Performed really well in qualifying. Commentating over him, I remember in Baku, he clutched up to take pole right at the death. And Baraka, I mean, he's just quite simply absolutely rapid.
He is absolutely rapid, and Denzo, I think, has actually joined IFR in the last couple of weeks, so that's probably why the name change has been had. Obviously, Baraka is part of LR, a part of Leonis Racing. They're going to be really interesting to see as well how they get on and how they cope as a team. Obviously, formerly being teammates, now within two completely different esports organisations. It's always hard to pinpoint in. But remember, this is FRL. This is not like EML. This is not F1 esports or anything like that. So there's nothing really to prove apart from getting that Drivers' Championship towards the end of the season. And Denzo, I think, probably one of the ones to watch out for in terms of the Drivers' Championship. Rocco and Nathan, I'm going to nail them on for the constructors. I think both of them are very, very good friends. Both within different esports teams, within Excel and Relentless. And if you've seen my commentaries on LOE, you'll know that there's a bit of beef between Excel and Relentless in LOE. But if they can put differences aside, and if they can work together, they are such a strong pairing. Nathan, always inconsistent, but if he can get that consistency up, we know how Rocco is in terms of his pace. He could be one to watch out for, and they could be one to watch out for.
Yeah, I think Nathan would have to get his Wi-Fi down to a 4 before he can really go for that championship. But it's undeniable. His qualifying pace is very good. And I think Rocco has, in the last 2 seasons, been a little bit overlooked in terms of his pace. He kind of goes unmentioned in a lot of the races by his just kind of making nice progress in the races consistently. I remember Belgium in the social race. It is a social race, of course, but just catching up to the pack and making some nice overtakes. I think he could be possibly a title contender, but he would have to probably really go that extra mile compared to last season, where, to be fair, after having a break last season and joining back for the Haas, he looked a lot better in the second half than he did in the first half.
Yeah, he did, and I think that's Rocco's racecraft. He is the overall package, really, as it comes to FRL F1. He's probably one of the examples to follow in terms of racecraft, in terms of pace. Probably one of the ones to watch out for. I see comments coming through there, by the way. I think Denzel's in the chat, and he's saying they haven't announced him yet in IFR. So, LR, if you're watching, I apologise for breaking that exclusive news on an FRL stream. But going back to FRL F1, we were speaking just before we came live, and Bosman and Messina, I think, are very interesting pairing. Bosman, we saw what he did in Bahrain, albeit with a puncture right at the end of the race, and one of the most thrilling finishes I can remember in FRL. he's got Messina alongside him. Messina, obviously formerly of F1 Esports fame as Shazoo name changer, famously, of course, Technique Gaming in the past, NXX Valtteri. He's had so many name changes. He's probably outdoing Jack in FRL F2, I think, for that. Yeah. But Messina, probably one of those consistent drivers. We know his pace. We see it evolve before last season. And both Man and Messina, I think, are very interesting pairing. Jensen and Macho as well. Macho, new signing, obviously, for TTG. Jensen, obviously the defending champion. We can't overlook him. He's been doing more ABS training, I think, on this game, and he's trying to handle with the no ABS. So it's a bit difficult for him at the minute. He's been placed as a reserve in LOE F1, so if we look into that a bit further, he should be right towards the top end once again in this season of FRL F1.
Yeah, I haven't been around FRL for a while, but I can't remember another time where you've had two champions of F1 and F2 in the same team for the next season. I think Jensen and Macho definitely going to be there. Macho also shows his pace from last season. I know Macho's a bit undecided whether he wants to run ABS or not, but ABS or not, to be fair, I think Macho, especially joining TTGA, he might get a little push and just maybe a bit of a confidence boost that he can maybe just fight for those podium positions like he did in F1 last season when he was only an F1 reserve. I remember Belgium, I think he was right up there, had a spin. I can't remember where he finished, but those two can't be overlooked, especially not Macho, and as always, we do expect Jensen to always be right at the top of that grid.
Yeah, I think actually Macho, if I remember rightly, he set pole position, I think, in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. That was in an FRL grade, and I was so surprised about his pace around Mexico, albeit it's one track. But if you look into that in a bit more detail, we know Macho's got the pace. We saw him have a really good battle, obviously, with T-Hawk for the F2 title last season. And he's alongside Jensen, obviously, being F1 champion. But never overlook that man in Team 10, Kazizzle. Watch out for Kazizzle. He is such a consistent driver. He's got his act together from back in the past where he was pretty aggressive in terms of his move making in the past in FRL. But Kazizzle, probably one of those guys that is aiming towards the F1 esports fame, I think. And probably one of the ones that I would say is the favourite for the FRL F1 title.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think Kazizzle has the second fastest time in the whole world on PS4 at Singapore. So there's some tracks where, to say the least, he's lightning fast, but he's just going to have to really keep a cool head throughout this whole championship. He made the mistake in Spain, which won't do his confidence the world of good or a C by pitting again to put him down into P4, handing over the win to none other than Surface, who is a reserve RC for this season. So it has to be said, if we got the reserves up as well, I think the grid would look even better. But definitely, I think one team we might not have mentioned at all is Team 1. Lars has had a bit of a mixed reputation in FRL, but he's back again, and I think he's definitely, we can agree, back as a lot stronger than before. Had another name change to Lars Kramer F1, so he's another one who's getting all the name changes done before the new season. He got third in a McLaren, I believe, around Spain, only quite close to name changer, or sorry, I should say Messina the whole time, and he's been always at the forefront of the F1 grids, and I think this season won't be any exception.
Yeah, I think obviously with that name change, I was going to call them Team FVR because they were in the same team, the same esports organisation. And Lars Kramer and Burrell suit their team, I think, so well. They are around the same pace, around the same talent level as well. Watch out for them, I think, in terms of the constructors, because they're going to be really interesting. Obviously, both being Dutch as well. We'll come on to the Dutch teams in just a second as well. But Lars and Burrell, I think, probably going to be one of the leading lights, I think, in terms of the constructors. We haven't mentioned, obviously, Jonah and Nawalk as well. Jonah, very, very good driver. We saw how consistent they were in Spain last time out. Obviously, Nick joined me on commentary for that. And if you go back and watch that, Jonah and Nawalk settled into FRL F1 really well. They deserve their place in the same team. They deserve their pace in FRL F1. And it's probably going to be fascinating to see how they get on. I don't think we've mentioned Black Box and Obrock either. And they are very, very quick in terms of their pairing. Both Brits, of course. Black Box, of course, won in America last season. Obrock, a very consistent driver himself, obviously driving for the Contest of Speed esports team. And them two in a pairing together could put themselves forward for the constructors title. And I'm having a look at some of the comments that are coming through as well.
Yeah, me too.
Jensen's saying he said Jensen, Denzel, Black Box 1, 2, 3. And Kazizel, Messina, Lars, Baraka, and Jonah. That's for Denzo, I think, for top 5.
Yeah, I think Jonah, I know from doing a URL social race with him and AWARP involved, they're always sticking like glue together. So I think in terms of the constructors, they can be really positive about both of them consistently bringing home the points. Another team which we have overlooked, I think we've got a few more still to go, is obviously I'm not sure whether he's still part of CPI, unless I'm wrong. Hiddy and Ties was a bit of a sour end to their last season, when obviously in Austria they did decide to have a bit of fun and crash each other out at the penultimate corner. But they're back and hopefully better than ever. Ties, I mean, he's definitely got the one-lap pace. He was up there sometimes with Montana in previous seasons. I think in season 11 France, remember he being second or maybe even on pole in qualifying. And Hiddy, the F2 and F3 champion from the past. So I think it'd be a bit ambitious for him to go for the F1 title, but I think those two will just try and get the consistent performances in early and then really push the mark and probably get a bit more aggressive towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I think with Hiddy as well, and obviously Kazizel being a former champion as well, I'm not mistaken, we've got either 4 current or former champions racing there for all F1, which I think is phenomenal given the amount of talent that's actually in FRL going forward in F1. And yeah, I think Tees and Hiddy, obviously both a Dutch pairing, and both going to be, I think, overlooked, and they're going to be the underdogs, I think, as it comes. If they put their performances together, get that consistency rolling right from the get-go in Bahrain, they're going to be quite competitive, I think, probably around the mid-pack, but if they keep at it, like we see probably with Jacko and Bullboy in F3, if they keep it consistent throughout the season, they could be one of the guys that takes forward. And I think the last but not least team is Peterval and Lou. Peterval, we've seen his pace before, the Czech man, obviously. He's alongside Lou this season in FRL F1. And both of them are going to be looking to try and get towards the top end of the field. Probably top 10 finishers is probably their aim. But Peter, I think, has got more of a look on the Drivers' Championship. He is probably one of the main consistent drivers within the tier. But it's a stacked grid. Any one of these 20 drivers could win it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've had the best start to the season. I know Lou missed the Spain race as he was actually in Spain, and I think Peters has some sort of leg injury, so he'll be, I think, missing at least the first race of the season. So that's going to hurt them towards the start of the season for their constructors bid. But drivers-wise, I mean, as they start to settle in towards the new drivers, which they might be a little bit unfamiliar with some of them, definitely Petter and Lou, I think they would probably be my dark horses for to get a few wins throughout the season. I wouldn't say drivers, because I think that's probably a step too far, but never say never in FRL, definitely. I mean, they both have the pace, as we saw in a social race, like you were saying, fighting against each other as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see maybe if there's an inter-team rivalry. I think they're both very nice guys, so I don't imagine so, but they'll both be pushing each other as best as they can, which is obviously the best, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's good to come onto this as well, because in all tiers in FRL, consistency and being in rhythm with your teammate is absolutely crucial, because if you're fighting with your teammate and you're fighting aggressively with your teammate, it's not a great look from your perspective, and certainly from your teammate's perspective, and certainly from a viewer's perspective as well, because they'll think that, there's team battles going on, and they're not working for each other and they're not working for the team. I think teammates have been all important in FRL, and I think if you work well with your teammate, you're going to work well, and that'll carry the momentum forward. So if you work well with your teammate, you'll work well in terms of your performances and in terms of the overall championship picture as well, looking at FRL F1. But as I say, it's a stacked grid. Any one of these 20 drivers could win it. And do you know what? I'm commentating on FRL F1. I'm going to make a prediction at this point. And I am going to predict that... You've got me on the spot here, I think, because I think Black Box might win the title. I think Black Box has got a really, really good consistent pace. If he can keep that consistency up, he will be my favourite, I think, for the Drivers' Championship. Watch out for Jensen, obviously, Drivers' Champion last season. He'll be one to watch out for. I think he'll finish second in the championship. And I'm going to go Messina for third. And in terms of the constructors, Boltzmann and Messina for the constructors.
I think passing the baton over, I'd go for a very boring choice, if you can call it that, of Baraka to win the Drivers. His pace is phenomenal for a man who's only 14 years old and already looking on to, hopefully for his sake, get into esports when in 2 years' time. So that's a scary prospect for sure. In terms of second, I would probably put that towards Brock, who's didn't perform his best race ever in FRL, obviously in Spain, in a pre-season race, but he looked really quite fast on the laps he did manage to keep it on the track and be very consistent. Third, I might go for Hiddy, which is a really weird one, but I think his championship winning kind of a phenomenon from a few other seasons he's obviously been around, I think that could stick with him quite nicely and actually put a championship fight on. I think I'll probably go with you for the constructors with Boltzmann and Messina, which is probably teammates you maybe wouldn't expect, but both of them obviously been around quite a while now, so they've both got the experience and the knowledge of all the other drivers around them to make the best calls at the present time.
Yeah, and I think from Boltzmann's perspective as well, just coming on to that team pairing, Messina, former F1 esports talent, of course, and Boltzmann will see that and look at him and probably think, well, you're as quick as me in terms of the pace now. How did you end up in F1 esports? But I think that will work at a good thing, I think, from Boltzmann's perspective and from Messina as well. It'll, as I say, any one of these 20 drivers can win it, and the only way you can find out, of course, for who might win the championship is to tune in to FRL 1 and FRL F2 on a Tuesday night, 7 p.m. UK time. Myself and Nick are taking you through FRL F1. FRL F2 commentators are Bunty.
They are Bull Bueno Stephen, with obviously the reserve being, if I can remember, I think it's Oliver, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously reserve commentator for F1 is Charlie. F3 commentators are James.
You've got me in a right pickle here. I don't know. Pass it back to you, I think.
I think there are Tyson Macho with Lou as a reserve, and F4 is of course myself, Mads and Dan Richardson. So you've got a full 12 commentators, so hopefully if anyone does get ill throughout the season, which is obviously inevitable, or has some sort of schedule, we will be able to replace them, so we should always have a very strong commentary line. And I think we could come on to that. The commentators for next season are also very good, of course, yourself returning, and Charlie, and of course URL Nick, and all the others who are really, really punching above their weight commentary-wise. It's going to be a really entertaining season from the viewer's perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, I think from a commentator's perspective, obviously, I'm back in FRL F1, and if you're listening to if any of the commentators are actually listening, follow me as an example in terms of the commentary and in terms of how it's done, because I think we need to provide everyone that is tuning in, the drivers, the viewers, new members to FRL, the biggest possible experience in terms of making them feel welcome, making them at home, and making them see some really good action, I think, out on track. And I wish everyone, from drivers to commentators to everyone behind the scenes, the best of luck, I think, in FRL. Let's make this the best season of FRL that's ever been had.
Certainly, and I do think it could well be the best. And obviously, to tune into, hopefully we can call this the best season ever, tune in exactly a week's time for the opening round of Season 13 FRL, which will be F4 and F3. And on Tuesday, 7 p.m. British Standard Time, is obviously going to be F1 and F2, hosted by, hopefully, James and Nick or Charlie. And for F2, that'll be O'Steven and Bullboy, who I'm sure will be as consistent as you can get commentary-wise. I don't think they'll be missing any race altogether. So from myself and James, hope you'll have enjoyed the teammates being released, and we'll probably catch you around Thursday 7 p.m. BST for the teams being released, whether it's myself and James or Hawk or whoever it is. hopefully you catch us until then.